Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Hudson Highlands Land Trust. The webinar is called Open Spaces Gone Viral, and we're going to be talking about what is going on with our parks and trails in the Hudson Highlands area. What I'm first going to do is give you some background as to why we wanted to hold this webinar now. Then I'm going to introduce the panelists. They're going to speak for about 50 to 60 minutes. Then we're going to open it up for question and answer, and I'll go through the logistics of how you can ask a question in a few minutes. First of all, I just wanted to give you the background on why we wanted to do this webinar now. You know, as I know many of you know, and we've got people on this webinar from both sides of the Hudson River. We've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of visitation to the Hudson Highlands over the past decade. But then what happened over the past few months, of course, was with the pandemic and with the stay-at-home orders, we actually had more people visiting the Highlands than ever before. And we had a lot of new people, again, on both sides of the river. And things got so congested on the east side of the Hudson that in fact there was a lot of choke points where people could no longer social distance, and the trails along the Route 9D corridor had to be closed down, which then led to people going across the river to other places in the Hudson Highlands, and they too got very congested. Well, now in New York, we're reopening again. We're in phase 2 of the reopening in the Hudson Valley. And so we thought it's a good time to talk about, well, how do you achieve that balance between access to open space versus dealing with overcrowding? And so that's exactly what the panelists are going to address today. But first, they're going to start off by talking about some of the history. What's the history of the parks? What's the history of the trails? How did they get so popular? And what's been this increase in visitorship that we've seen now that the state is opening again? What are some of the near-term solutions over the next few months to address these overcrowding issues while still providing public access? And then what are the long-term solutions, the infrastructure solutions that will come with projects like the Fjord Trail, that it will be addressed as well? But, you know, I want you to know that we look to all of you for your constructive feedback and suggestions as to what can be done better. And there will be ways that you can get involved in helping address some of these problems. I'm first going to introduce the panelists, then I'll talk a little bit about the Q&A session. So Linda Cooper is the State Parks. She runs the Taconic region for State Parks. She's going to talk first. I think Evan Thompson, who runs Hudson Highlands and Fawnestock State Park, is also on and may be available to answer questions at Q&A time. And I wanted to thank them both for all of that they've done through the pandemic and with the park closures. I know they've been out there every weekend telling people that the parks were closed and having to turn disappointed people away. Hank Osborne from New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, who spearheaded the Trail Steward program. He is going to talk about that program and what it means for us in the Hudson Highlands. Then Amy Casala from Scenic Hudson and the Fjord Trail Project is going to be speaking about the long-term solution to dealing with visitor management in our area. Then Rita Shaheen, also from Scenic Hudson, will be talking about Scenic Hudson parks in the Route 9D corridor and what is happening with those. So again, we're going to have about 50 to 60 minutes of presentations, what's going on, what's going to happen in the future. Then we're going to open it up to Q&A. You'll see at the bottom of your screens a little Q&A box. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, put the cursor there. On the far right, you'll see a Q&A box. You can ask your questions through there. Some will be answered online through the panelists typing. In other cases, we might actually ask people who have questions that will be relevant to everybody to come online, and we'll put your audio on and you can have some back and forth with the panelists. So with that, we're going to switch it over now to Linda Cooper from State Parks, the Taconic Region Director. to start her presentation. Thank you very much, and I hope this is helpful to you.
Where's my share screen? Oops, there it is, share screen. Well, hello everybody. So where am I on? Are we okay?
Yes, you're on. We can hear you.
Thank you. Sorry for the hesitation. It's still a new media for us to be using. So as Michelle said, I am the regional director for the New York State Parks and Recreation, Historic Preservation. I run the Taconic region, which are Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, and Columbia County Parks. Evan Thompson is on. He's the park manager for Fahnestock, Clarence Fahnestock Memorial State Park, Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve, and Wonder Lake State Park. And that conglomerate of parks is in 3 counties, Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess, which makes it a pretty large assemblage of 25,000 acres of parkland that we oversee. And most of that is hiking. The regional map was on the screen. So we were talking today a little bit about, the area right around Breakneck Ridge, and everyone knows, why wouldn't you want to go to Breakneck Ridge? It's just very, very popular. It's spectacular. It's rocky. It has great ruins at Northgate and the Cornish. It has its own train stop. It's a pretty amazing place. And so for many years, even before current time, we are starting to see an increased visitation in our state parks. People are discovering hiking. They're looking for what we call their aha moments. Their times of saying, gosh, that's really pretty. They want to create a memory. They want to be out with friends. They want to be in the outdoors. They want something that's challenging. And the Hudson Highlands provides a lot of that. And, it's funny, and I sit back and look and the first time I climbed Breakneck, and it was probably around 45 years ago, and much the same. I remember going up there was nobody there, and it was probably on a weekend. I was probably doing it, I was working in the city at the time, and you'd come up and nobody was there. There were barely any blazes, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful hike. Well, that experience is still beautiful. It's still a great hike. There are many more blazes, but that is changing, and tourism has become one of New York's main industries, and we have been discovered. And so the Hudson Highlands, when social media came into being on everybody's phone, somebody would take a picture, they'd send it to their friends, they'd say, look where I am, and that just rippled along, and more and more and more people wanted to have that same aha moment and that same challenge of going on the rocks of Breakneck Ridge and the surrounding Hudson Highlands. And then the pandemic came. And so as of March 20th, Governor Cuomo said, no fees to get into state parks. Everybody go outside. You can't really go to the movies. You can't go to restaurants. You can't socialize, but you can go outside. So we started to see even more people coming into the parks. And then we went into phase 1 at the end of May, and now we're in phase 2. So we shut down the parks for a period where we've opened the parks now, and we were concerned at the time of shutdown that people were coming from all over. They were parking all over in a pretty helter-skelter manner. New Jersey did not have its parks open, and we felt that we could not contain the situation in the best possible manner. The local officials were concerned about people going into the grocery stores and what level, as this growing contagion was spiking upward, what could we do? And so we ultimately determined that we left some trails open, but a number of them we closed. So as we started to reopen, we opened them one at a time over the past week. And it's again at 3 counties. So we have issues that are in Westchester around Anthony's Nose, issues at the Breakneck and Washburn lot, and issues around Mount Beacon primarily. So this was taken in order for us to achieve any kind of success in visitor management. We need to coordinate with many partners. But I wanted to take a moment and just take a brief look at how the park has grown, what kind of uses were on the site before we ended up becoming a state park, and how did these trails actually get created. So if you go back to the 20s, there was a very little bit of parkland, and it was across the river. And then you get around Sugarloaf started to come in, 30s and 40s. And then you have Con Ed proposing its hydroelectric plant, and that's in red, and I'll mention it again in a moment with another photo, but you start to see a little bit of growth of the parkland in the green area on our side of the river. Then it grows again up into the 1990s. And all of a sudden, you know, you start, and we added 128 acres to this park this week. So in Garrison. And I think that's what happens is we continue to add to this park, build to Fahnestock, and you can see there's a very small gap between Fahnestock and Hudson Highlands, which we're trying to close. And it's made for amazing hiking in very close proximity to the largest metropolitan area of New York City. So I want to remind people, though, that back in the 30s, this was a quarry. I mean, Mount Taurus Quarry was producing stone for construction, and it was the Hudson River Stone Corporation, and that was in operation until 1967. So, you know, when we look at what we're hiking in now, you have to think about Cold Spring being essentially an industrial town that had a lot of mines, it had a lot of quarries, it had a foundry, and a very, very different from the sort of quaint and idyllic little hamlet that it is right now. And then in the 60s, Storm King, which is really part of the whole breakneck experience, is the being able to look across the narrowness of the Hudson and see the amazing rise of Storm King. So when in 1963, the Scenic Hudson Preservation Conference, which is the precursor of our existing Scenic Hudson that's on this, one of the presenters here, they opposed the proposal from Con Edison to build this hydroelectric plant that was going to be producing 2 million kilowatts of energy, electricity for, you know, peak and emergency periods to supply the New York City and the Hudson area. And they won a lawsuit in 1965 that was very precedent setting, that said that you had to take into account environmental and aesthetic impacts of proposals. And that became the underpinning of our National Environmental Policy Act and of our State Environmental Quality Review Act. And it's, you know, it's really, I think, fascinating to recognize our pivotal role in environmental protection right here in the Hudson Valley and right here in our Hudson Highlands. So we know that we love Breakneck, and we know that we love Bull Hill or Mount Taurus and Mount Beacon, and so did people before it was a park. And so these are volunteers who were helping to build those trails in early times before the state park was even in operation. And a lot of our trails today, this is a New York, New Jersey Trail Conference map, a lot of our trails today are built by volunteers, maintained by volunteers, and we are always refining the trail system and adding new land, adding new routes, trying to take out routes that seem to be inappropriate. And as Amy Casala will tell you later, there's a new trail going in on Breakneck as well. So with the Hudson Highlands Park Preserve, it has had extraordinary growth in visitation, as I said, especially because once the photos started being shown on social media. So we went from, say, 600 people in 2014 going up the Little Rock Scramble to 2,000 people in a single day going up the rocks. That's a lot of people to go on one trail, essentially in probably an 8-hour period. So I think that that's amazing. And as we had so many people come there, they're going down to Anthony's Nose and going up to Mount Beacon. So we ended up with, this is one of the few trails that has its own train station. The train station's been there for many, many years, but can imagine when the train stops and all of a sudden you can get 200 to 400 people who are starting their hike at the same time. You can also go to Beacon, you can go to Cold Spring. So we have both the train population and the car population. And I know that most of the millennials that I talk to who live in New York City, and they come from all over the country, they say, I've been to Breakneck, I've been to Mount Taurus, I've been to Mount Beacon, and it's a definite go-to destination for so many of the, not just the youth, but everyone, tourists. One time I was up on walking the Washburn Trail up Bull Hill, and I could not believe the number of different languages that I heard. And I would talk to people, and they were all telling me that they were actually tourists coming in from different countries, and they just wanted to walk outside of the city, and they looked to find a place, and they took the train or they rented a car and they came up. And that's pretty typical of our weekend population. So our existing conditions of parking, we have a number of lots. There's the Washburn lot that we just expanded in coordination with the town of Phillipstown. It has 47 spaces. There's some parking at Little Stony Point itself. There's a trolley that the county operates that's a flag trolley, so you have to wave it down, and a lot of people don't really understand that system. And that works on weekends from the train station. It goes out to Fonsdock, down to Boscobel, and up to actually into Beacon. And then at Cold Spring itself, the Metro North lot has a fair number of free spaces on the weekend, and it's free parking, although technically it's supposed to be used for the train, but it is available parking. We have been looking at parking lots, and we've been looking at how are people parking along the roadway. We've been working with the Department of Transportation to add some more no parking signs. The Chalet property is going to have, we hope to have about 20 or 25 spots in there to have people go up the Brook Trail, the southern part. We do not want anybody walking through the Breakneck Tunnel. There's no space, it's high speed, it's dangerous. We do anticipate in the future trying to have a shuttle, and that would be, you know, we'll need outside funding, but we think it's something that could be a real asset to this corridor. So again, no access in the Breakneck Tunnel. And we're focused on trying to limit the parking along Route 9D and Fishkill. So one of the things we looked at is, could you eliminate parking in this corridor? And what we've discussed in coordination with DOT was that it would be better to get people to park on parallel parking, and then kind of use that as a way to move toward a lower speed limit, excuse me, on Route 9D. So we have added, have worked with DOT, and there will be some more no parking signs though, to limit people going around different parts of the road and try to make it so that it's safe. Amy will talk to you later about the Breakneck Connector project, which is projected to be completed in 2022. But again, that will formalize some of this parking definition that we're doing informally now with signs, and that will result, DOT has said, once those elements are put in place, they will lower the speed limit from 55 to 40. So again, up at Route 9D, at the Metro North lot, north of the southbound platform, we're putting in no parking signs around those curves as it goes into Fishkill. So we're hoping to reduce the number of cars that actually are in the road and put them where they belong and keep them in parallel parking. So we look at short-term and long-term measures. It's looking at the parallel parking, the no parking, working with DOT and signage, working on messaging, and we could use as much help from you all and what those outlets should be. And long-term, we see a necklace of parking lots that we might be able to take people, put them into different parking areas and disperse them into the trails from different locations. Clearly, this needs more funding. Same thing with the shuttle. I sort of think about Acadia National Park with a shuttle that they have that you know, park in one lot and the shuttle moves you through. And I think we could look to do something similar. So immediate tasks, we've been meeting with DOT and we have gotten signs out there for no parking and parallel parking. Those are all enforceable by law. We are delineating parallel parking, and we have discovered that people don't really know what parallel parking is. Some people, as they were getting ticketed for doing head-on parking, were saying, but I'm parallel to the car next to me. Isn't that parallel parking? And it isn't. So we've been putting some barriers out to help define what that means. And we've talked about whether or not there's any kind of time ticketing or queuing pattern that could work, and we have been unable to come up with something that we think works, especially in the knowing that we have trains that often will stop and unload so many people at one time. If somebody has some thoughts as to a system that could work, we're open to discussion. If you have an idea that you think is workable, you know, at some of the places, the Blue Hole in the Catskills, they're limited to 25 permits a day, and I somehow shudder to think if we said we were going to, okay, we're only going to allow 25 or 100 hikers to go through here, that's just not going to work, and we're not going to be able to message it out well enough to do that. We were turning away about 500 people a day while it was closed, and fairly well messaged on that closure. We have really been working very closely with a lot of law enforcement. It's been clear that the density reduction programs that we need to keep into place, not just for the COVID environment, but probably forever, it doesn't work unless you have staff. And in this case, we've been working very closely with Sheriff Langley of Putnam County, the state police, the park police. Captain Capizzelli runs our park police unit, and we've had people there all the time. The town of Fishkill, town of Phillipstown, village of Cold Spring are all collaborating with us to help enforce what we're putting out there. And I think it will take everybody, and we're trying to make it in sort of segments so that it is not overwhelming for any one agency. Continuing to work with MTA. I don't know how many of you realize we don't actually own state parks do not own the initial 500 feet or more of the Breakneck Trail. It's owned by MTA. So we are working on a survey right now, and then we'll purchase that from the MTA or acquire it from the MTA. And then we also have talked to the railroad about trying to educate the train patrons when they head to Breakneck. Now the train is not running right now, and we don't necessarily anticipate that it will run until the pandemic and the contagion drops down a little bit, but this certainly is running to Cold Spring and to Beacon, just not to the Breakneck stop. So reopening, we know we're going to have signage. We have some signage out there. We may put some more. We know we need staffing and messaging about what we're putting in. We know we need to coordinate with our partners. You're going to hear from Hank Osborne how we work with the trail stewards and what we're thinking about bringing some more volunteers involved, and where the stewarding program has grown from here to many other locations. And again, we're very grateful to Hank and his leadership in working to establish the stewards and make this program as successful as it is. So there's no quick or easy fix. The words are on the screen, and we'll repeat them all the time, whether it's at Anthony's Nose or Breakneck Ridge or Mount Beacon. These are very, very popular hiking areas, and we are working to minimize the adverse impacts. And we want to make sure that our hikers, the travelers on the roadways, the bicyclists, that the natural resources, that the condition of the trails are all taken care of. And I think this is going to be a long-term engagement for us. It's not something that we're going to resolve this year, but I know that we've put a tremendous amount of work and attention into Breakneck and the surrounding trails over the last several years, and I see significant differences already in terms of the maps and the blazes and awareness, and we are just hoping to work with all of you to inspire an environmental ethic, a leave no trace, an honoring of the community as well as the trail network as we move forward and reopen these trails and continue to provide a fabulous experience for our visitors. So with that, I'm going to turn the screen over to Hank Osborne from the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, hello. My name is Hank Osborne. I grew up in Phillipstown, and I'm the director of programs at the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. I also lead the board of directors of the the Friends of Fahnestock and Hudson Highlands State Parks, and I currently live right next to Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve. Now, the history of the Trail Steward program, it all starts with flip-flops. Back in 2013, the Trail Conference received a phone call from the regional director of New York State Parks, Linda Cooper, the previous presenter just now. I then learned of a very challenging situation at Breakneck Ridge. Hundreds of visitors were getting lost and were getting hurt, and they were requiring rescues. Local emergency services were overtaxed. There was an average of 2 to 4 rescues required every single weekend. People were showing up in droves at Breakneck Ridge, and they were unprepared for the 3 to 5 hour challenge ahead of them. Many people were attempting the hike with no water, and many people wore completely inappropriate footwear. Some people had boots with no shoelaces. Some people had no socks. Some people wore high heels, and some people wore flip-flops, and some people wore high-heeled flip-flops. Visitors were straying off of the marked trails, and they were creating their own social trails and desire lines, and thus greatly impacting the native plants and animals and causing more hikers to get lost because they began to follow the trampled areas that looked like trails. The hikers were leaving the marked trails, and they were leaving garbage. State Parks asked the Trail Conference to join their efforts, and we were asked to station somebody at the trailhead. We responded to the park's request by creating a pilot program that summer in 2013. And it was an instant success. And we collected the data to prove it when our need for rescues was reduced to 0 and nobody attempted the trail in flip-flops. Overuse and misuse of the most popular outdoor destinations is threatening the ecological integrity of these special places. And the Trail Conference has taken a leadership role in coordinating stewardship efforts to keep up with growing threats. Threats to the trails, and threats to the environment, and threats to the well-being of visitors, and threats to the local communities. The Trail Conference has joined with land managers like New York State Parks and with local partners like Hudson Highlands Land Trust to expand the Steward program to multiple trailheads and summits in the Hudson Valley. We have expanded the training program as well. We now provide training to New York State Parks Department staff and other outside agencies and other organizations. State Parks also has trail stewards at the Washburn Trailhead, and they do a very similar outreach and education for visitors. And it's important to appreciate that both the Trail Conference and State Parks provide trail stewards. The Hudson Highlands Land Trust also plays an important role in the Trail Steward program, especially in steward training and teaching the stewards about natural resource protection. Last season, we trained over 75 individual trail stewards for deployment throughout lower New York State. This year's training has been delayed by COVID-19, but we will begin training for our 2020 season this coming Thursday. And stewards will be on the ground on-site stewarding on June 27th. That's 2 weeks from tomorrow. Train service to the Breakneck Ridge stop is currently suspended and will probably remain suspended for the foreseeable future. But until recently, every Saturday and Sunday, 6 trains from Grand Central Station arrived at the dedicated Breakneck Ridge stop. Some trains unloaded hundreds of hikers that we ever recorded disembarking from a single train was 500. That means that over 500 people are beginning their hike together. Based on our trail counts, Breakneck visitation is possibly exceeding 250,000 hikers annually. Because trail stewards have implemented user surveys, we actually now know that we've been able to discover that the the majority of these people are experiencing one of their first outdoor adventures. And in many cases, they are hiking for the first time in their lives. And for some, it's their absolute first time experiencing nature at all. Stewards are in a position to shape this experience. Now, the breakneck hike involves quite a few sections of scrambling, and scrambling is a type of travel up steep terrain that does not require the use of ropes, but does require the use of your hands, and then thus a backpack becomes a necessity, because without a backpack, hikers have no place to put their food or water bottles or to pack out their garbage. So what do hikers do if they don't have a pack? Steward guidance extends beyond the trails. The education provided by stewards improves the quality of the outdoor experience, but also the impacts on the local community. Stewards help to direct hikers to the city of Beacon and to the village of Cold Spring and tell them where to get hiking gear and where to eat and where to shop. If we know that Cold Spring is already congested, we direct people to Beacon. And for the past 8 years, we've attempted to track which town, Cold Spring or Beacon, hikers tend to visit after their hikes. And although stewards often recommend Beacon after Cold Spring gets congested, the majority of visitors still continue to make their way to the village of Cold Spring anyway, according to our steward data. Now, the data collected by stewards is invaluable for planning purposes. When on duty on the weekend, stewards count every single hiker and tally the counts every hour, every day. And it's interesting to note that there's actually a direct correlation between the number of hikers and the sales of our digital online maps, and that hikers can download onto their phones. And on this chart, back here in 2012, this is before we started our first steward program. 2013, we had our pilot season. 2014 showed a lot more growth. We had a full season of stewards here. And 2015 hit a record. 2016 is actually a bigger record. 2017, another record. And then 2018 was a very rainy weekend season. And 2019 last year. And now this year, 2020, COVID-19, here's March, April, May. And this chart is showing sales of an online map, which the way I interpret it is that people that already have the map, people that are already hiking, don't download the map again. It's representative of people that are new to hiking or new to the area. So I interpret it as a lot of new visitors coming to our area wanting the maps. So the data collected by stewards is that we're able to document, basically we've documented this tremendous rise in visitorship, but we've also been able to calculate the dramatic decline in the amount of first aid and rescues required as a result of stationing stewards on site. But it's also important to note that during this same time of good news, state parks also had a big initiative to improve the signage and wayfinding in the park. So that helps a lot for people getting lost. So the park staff have done a lot to improve wayfinding in the park. COVID-19 guidelines will not allow photos like this one because the stewards this season will not be standing this close to each other. And they will also be wearing masks. And they're also not going to be distributing anything. So they'll not be passing out surveys or maps. Surveys will be verbal and maps will be in a help yourself box. And we won't be selling anything. We won't be selling maps. So money and credit cards will not be changing hands. And this season for hiring our stewards, we've lost a few people that have dropped out because of COVID-19 scares. But we've been very lucky that we are still in a position, as usual, every season, in a position to hire only top quality candidates. And I always feel so lucky that I'm able to choose high energy, engaging, charismatic, outgoing, outdoorsy people. And that really makes a difference because stewards often only have a few seconds to make a connection with a visitor. Last year was the first year that the Trail Conference engaged AmeriCorps members to serve as trail stewards. In the past, stewards worked 2 days a week. In contrast, AmeriCorps members serve 5 days a week, 8-hour days, and they're doing stewarding on site at trailheads and on the trails and on the summits on Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. But they can also do it on weekdays when the weather looks to draw large numbers of hikers. Also on the other days each week, the stewards perform trail maintenance and garbage pickups and data management. And in September, they go into schools to teach the 7 Leave No Trace principles, and they teach an anti-graffiti agenda. Stewards are issued iPhones. That the phones ring from a common phone number, and the phone number is listed on the back of the free trail map for Hudson Highlands. And depending on the severity of the situation, stewards will alert park management or the police department or the local fire department whenever it's necessary. And some stewards are certified wilderness EMTs themselves, but at a minimum, all trail stewards are trained in wilderness first aid, which is an advanced 3-day first aid and CPR certification. Trail stewards welcome visitors, and they supply trail maps, and they teach new hikers how to read trail maps, and they teach new hikers how to read trail markers, and they suggest route options, and they recommend loops, and they teach people how to avoid poison ivy and ticks. And basically, trail stewards provide an orientation to the outdoors. This photo, again, Ben would be wearing a mask, and these visitors would be 6 feet away. Here, trail stewards, they interact with the public, and they allow them to find ways to give back. A lot of times we have visitors that want to volunteer, but they don't know how to do it. So basically, trail stewards build excitement about being in nature, and they cultivate and they recruit volunteers. And they recruit volunteers to serve on work trips and perform trail maintenance and trail building and garbage pickups. And the visitors then become the very people who protect our parks and our open spaces and protect the trails. And many of these people will become lifelong volunteers for the trails. And they're finding out how to volunteer because trail stewards are telling them in person how they can get involved. Oftentimes, right on site, trail stewards will hand out trash bags to interested hikers, and the hikers then pick up garbage along their hiking route, and they return the full bags back to a garbage collection point at the trailhead. The hikers feel a sense of accomplishment, and they enjoy making a difference. And the stewards are able to provide them genuine appreciation right in the moment. And that cannot be overstated. The power of the person in person is powerful. Beginning this summer, stewards will help to train local volunteers to act as trail stewards in their own right. This will take place in several key areas of Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve, and volunteers will be trained to interact with the visitors and recommend hikes and routes and loops and where to go after their hike. Then the goal is to protect the natural resource and to protect the local communities. This spring, we launched our first vernal pool steward program. It only lasted a few weeks and was cut short due to COVID-19 guidelines, but the program was a huge success, and we collected a lot of data about user knowledge of fragile ecosystems and the impacts of dogs off leash running through fragile vernal pools. And our vernal pool steward was stationed alongside a large vernal pool on the Washburn Trail in Cold Spring off of Bull Hill, and collected data on where visitors were from trails. And it's interesting to note that the survey showed that only 4% of visitors were from Putnam County, 13% from Westchester. Sorry, I meant to say Dutchess was 9%. Then Westchester at 13%, and then New York City, by far the largest So people are indeed coming from away. And finally, our natural resource protection is based on the 7 Leave No Trace principles. And all the Trail Conference trail stewards are certified Leave No Trace trainers. And they ask hikers to plan ahead, prepare, get a map and water, stay on the marked trails, respect plants and wildlife, wear a backpack, pack out their garbage, and be considerate of other visitors. And the Trail Conference received an award from the Leave No Trace organization. It was an award for outstanding care and stewardship of the Breakneck Ridge Trail. And I've been told countless times that the Trail Steward programs are providing an invaluable service to the local communities, that they benefit the rescue agencies, they protect the natural resource. But to me, the Trail Steward programs benefit the future. And the data shows that Trail Steward programs work. And we should work to continue the expansion of Trail Stewards, to protect the natural resource and to protect the local communities. Thank you. So now I am going to introduce our next speaker, who is Amy Casella of the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail.
Oh, hello. So thanks, Hank. And hello, everyone. We look forward to having a discussion at the end. I just have a few slides to talk about the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail, which hopefully most of you know has been in planning for quite some time. And we're really gaining a lot of momentum. Hank and Linda are both long-term members of the steering committee who's been helping to advance this large and complicated project. Scenic Hudson has been coordinating that. And now Scenic Hudson has worked to create a new nonprofit organization, which will be the Operations and Maintenance Organization. So we'll oversee the construction of the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail, and then as different pieces of it open up, we'll be doing the operations and maintenance of that. This project has been in the planning at the most basic level. The goal is to connect the train stations and waterfronts of Cold Spring and Beacon with the Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve in between, and all of the great hiking destinations there. And the project actually has the origin of the Cold Spring community. People watching people walk down the dangerous 9D to try to reach Breakneck from Cold Spring, and feeling like we have an obligation to do something before somebody really gets hurt. And so this idea is to create an off-road trail connection to let people safely access these resources. And that's where it was in 2015 when we did a master plan. What we have done is sort of think a little bit bigger now, and just say, let's keep that trail route, but how do we create a destination that's a park? So it's sort of a park within a park. The park being Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve. This would be a little park area within that to do a number of things, connect people to this landscape in a different way. And I think importantly for the Cold Spring area community, who really feel more of the brunt of the high visitation at present, we're looking to create some activities to the north so that more traffic does want to go and generate, that there will be a safe pedestrian connection to Beacon, potentially a trolley connection to Beacon, so that more of the activity gets drawn to the north instead of always coming back to the south. Because really this project is a visitor management strategy. It started with local community talking about how to manage visitation safely. That visitation has gone up and up ever since this project has been in discussion. And so we really did kind of step back and look at what it needs to perform given how much the visitation has been going up. And so we needed to adapt to really take this on as a visitor management strategy, a congestion management. So we looked at best practices from across the, the nation, where, It's a local challenge right now with high visitation in outdoor spaces, but that's a national problem, an international problem. So there's a lot of material out there on how to manage that. And so more importantly than now than ever, reducing congestion, helping disperse people out so that you don't have such the crowding that we do at present. Better circulation and more options, that's that distribution to the north, getting people spread out in this 7.5 mile geography and not just crowded up in little congestion areas like Breakneck. We'll be enhancing and adding to the parking supply. And as Linda alluded to, working to get a shuttle moving so that if there are remote lots, people can pick up a shuttle and get to their destination and back again without having to worry about parking as close as possible to their destination. Wayfinding and visitor direction. We've heard from, there was a survey done of Cold Spring residents a few years ago, and it really noted that people asking for directions, getting lost, bothering people on their front porches was really sort of detrimental to the quality of life in the village. So really having some strong wayfinding so that people can get to where they want to go as quickly as possible without a lot of wandering around and getting lost. And as I mentioned, so this operations and maintenance entity will then do some of the other negative kind of impacts the high visitation adds to the community in the form of garbage, just maintenance of these, you know, who's mowing, who's, you know, picking up things, fixing pavement, that sort of thing, security, including rescue activity most likely, and bathrooms. To add to that system, we know that the bathrooms at the bottom of the hill in Cold Spring, you know, feel the brunt of a lot of visitation. We'll be adding some more throughout the park system so that that can be handled. So we're making some near-term improvements in advance, and some of this is responsive to some of the challenges that have happened safety-wise in particularly the Breakneck area. So someone was hit by a train in the fall. We've been working with Metro North, State DOT, and state parks to come up with some early safety improvements that can be made at the trailhead area in that by the train stop, even though the train isn't running. That's actually an advantage because we have to do some work there. So putting in some fencing so that people can't just walk clear across the tracks the way they can today. Adding in some stronger connection to the southbound platform. A lot of people don't understand how to reach it, though they see it, and that leads them to walk across the train tracks. So we'll add a path and some better wayfinding for that. And as Linda had said, we're adding a new trail off of Breakneck. And that's for two purposes, I think, really. There are a number of lost hikers or trail spreading hikers who get to the flagpole and they say, I bit off more than I can chew. I just want to get back down. And they start to carve their way down. And so at the flagpole and in that area is where a lot of the social trail, and that does a lot of habitat damage. And so when we've had public workshops in the past, people really wanted to, they really asked us, what are you doing to deal with the carrying capacity of the mountain and the impacts on the ecology? And this is, while it's adding a trail, it's also going to allow us to clean up some trails and really restore the habitat. And it'll create a shorter loop option for people to get back down to the Wilkinson trailhead in about a 1 hour hike instead of taking the longer loops. Jump forward a little bit to the next year. What do we have ahead? The more comprehensive improvements to the Breakneck connector area. So this is the site plan as it's currently laid out. Not too different from what we looked at, but I think different in very good ways, much more artistically done. But we are limiting the parking, creating parallel parking, formalizing the parking lots. So you won't get that nose in parking behavior where people are backing into this 55-mile-an-hour roadway or parking in dangerous places. We'll be adding new train platforms to allow trains to unload the passengers more quickly, so it throws off train time sometimes. creating a bridge that will be connecting over to the DEP property in the near term, but will ultimately connect on the shoreline trail to the south. And moving the trailhead up. So right now the stewards gather right there at the mouth of the tunnel at the current trailhead. We're going to move those stewards up. And so you'll have this official start up the hill a little bit. And that's in this area here, which we call the upper overlook. And so there will be a new steward station for them to greet guests. They'll be able to point to right behind them to the sharp ascent and really educate people on what to expect on this trail, and creating a little space for enjoying the views. But again, designating those paths so people aren't scrambling all through this vegetation and different habitat. So we'll stop there. I will note that we had planned to go out to the community with different public listening sessions and presentations, and then COVID hit. So I think we've had 2 sessions before that. We'd like to get back out. So look for us to host an event like this over the summer. So one in July, one in August. In July, we can present more on the master plan and how that's matured. And in August, reveal more detailed and imagery on the Breakneck Connector improvements. So there is a temporary website, hudsonhighlandsfjordtrail.org. You can sign up for email blasts, and we'll start posting to that in July, a couple times a week with regular updates from the team. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Rita Shaheen, and I will be sharing my presentation with you right now. Here we go. Just 1 second, sorry. Okay. So thank you everyone for being on the call, and I'm very happy to be on this call with our partners at State Parks and Hudson Highlands Land Trust and the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. I'm going to be just talking briefly about Scenic Hudson and our role in the Hudson Highlands, and then kind of delving into the 5 parks that we have on the east side of the Hudson River and what's unique about them, and also the challenges that we have been having, and some of the short-term solutions that we've been working on, or solutions during the COVID-19 situation. So starting with this screen, building on or continuing Scenic Hudson's legacy of saving Storm King Mountain from destruction, our work is in 2 major categories of conservation and advocacy. Okay. And through that work, we have saved or protected over 58,000 acres, both for farmland, for hiking, for educational purposes, up and down the Hudson River, both sides of the river. And we've created, enhanced over 65 parks in the Hudson Valley for public enjoyment and natural resource protection. They're free, they're open to the public, they're open year-round, and we rely on help from our partners and volunteers to make this happen. So addressing COVID-19 in our parks in general. So the number of people who have been coming to our parks has increased exponentially. And we're really happy, as probably others who have public parks, to know that these outdoor spaces are serving a very important role right now, that they're one of the most valuable resources for people to be able to get outside and get some fresh air, get some exercise, get calm, have social distancing meeting or meetups, things like that. So what we have done and are continuing to do, our goal was to keep the parks open. to serve that purpose, which we have done. We've had to cancel events, gathering, volunteer projects, concessions, all those things. We've taken away things that people would pick up and have to take with them. We've removed or closed up toilets. We developed safety protocol for our staff where they have to work individually, so they're getting basic maintenance done in the parks. As you can see here with Carly Kiernan in her mask. We're monitoring the activity and we're adjusting as needed. And very important, we're coordinating with our partners here in the Hudson Highlands in particular. If you've been to some of the parks of Scenic Hudson during COVID, you probably saw a lot of big orange signs, more signs than we've ever really wanted to ever put in our parks, but I think during this time period, it's very important. And the signs are very specific about what to do when you get into the park, the parking lot, what you're doing when you're hiking, things like that. And in addition to kind of what you can't do in our parks or the new rules you have to have, we're keeping people informed via virtually. We have social media and e-blasts that are going out all the time. And we're adding virtual activities that are focused on caring, connecting, community, and collaboration. And so here's a link to check out. It's our Envision Summer series, which we've just kicked off the other night. And that will be going on throughout the summer. In the Hudson Highlands, Scenic Hudson obviously got our start with Storm King Mountain. We have conserved over 4,000 acres of land on the east side. Just roughly half of that we have transferred or sold to New York State Parks. And we have created 5 parks in this area. Each different, each have unique experience, and each I think offer a complement to the rugged experience that you have on Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve. And then we are involved, obviously, taking a leadership role in the development of the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail that Amy Casella just talked about. So I'm going to just quickly go through the 5 parks that we have in this area. So Mount Beacon Park, 15 acres. So over time, we have sold the remaining portion that we have protected to New York State Parks. So the map on your right, you would see this little inset down here in the lower left of the map. And that 15 acres is the portion that Scenic Hudson owns. So we call it the gateway, the trailhead, the parking area. And it then leads up the staircase and then becomes, gets part of the Hudson Highlands State Park as you go up to Mount Beacon. During COVID, while we wanted to keep every single park open, we were monitoring and evaluating and talking to our partners. And this one is the only one that we have had to temporarily close. We're happy to say that just on June 5th, we reopened it, keeping away the toilets and putting in the signs that you just saw the slide of, and establishing rules for this sort of pinch point here on the staircase, which I think is very important. At Long Dock Park, this park has been seeing many, many, many more people, and we're delighted that more people are coming. Obviously, that comes with challenges. But what's I think working about this park is that it's flat and there's a lot of spaces over that 19 acres where people can find their special little place anytime, but especially during COVID. The parking lot is packed, but it's on our property. It's overflowing. We're probably going to have some wear and tear in fixing it up, but for the most part, it's working quite well. The River Center is closed, and the River Center here, and we've separated the picnic tables under the picnic pavilion. We have no kayak operator there for tours or rentals, but you can bring your own kayak there. Trash has definitely been a problem, and we have increased our trash pickup with our contractor to every single day, and putting up signs like, please help us. Like we're working as hard as we can. And the Beacon Point part, which I showed in the earlier slide with the children fishing, that is closed right now for repairs, but not related to COVID. That work should begin shortly and be done in a couple of months. But there's plenty of other places to enjoy during this time. Over at Madam Brett Park on the Fishkill Creek, it's 12 acres, and this connects back to Dennings Point State Park, the Clara Sauer Trail, and Long Dock Park. In fact, all of these 5 parks are not just an isolated place. They have connections to other places or to Main Street. And here in the map, it shows kind of how the park is to the one side of the formerly known as the Beacon Terminal, and then to the other side with the boardwalk in between. And that boardwalk right here, that is the pinch point here during the COVID-19. So what we have done is put up signs that, excuse me, just getting rid of this. More recently, that are asking people to wear a mask when they're on that boardwalk, to go in single file, this is before that sign went up, and to actually don't fish on the boardwalk, although it's a terrific place, but go fish on the shoreline where there are other great places to access Fishkill Creek. We've also installed bike rack here, and we're installing them at some of our other parks that don't have bike racks to encourage people to ride their bike to the park instead of driving. More riding, less driving. At Foundry Dock Park in Cold Spring, as you know, hoping you've all been there, it's very small, but I like to call it the small park with a big attitude or big personality. There's, it's like a gateway to the marsh and to Cold Spring and to the Hudson River. And it connects back to the West Point Foundry Preserve and over to Constitution Marsh. Right here, it's an accessible site, ADA accessible, as is the other parks that I talked about, at least most of them with sections of them. Direct access to the train. And these 2 photos that you see in the lower portion, you can see activities with lots of kayaks, and we had music series, musical concerts. Well, those things are definitely not happening right now. And in talking to the concessionaire here and the one for the kayak concession outfitter here, Hudson River Expeditions, and at Long Dock Park Mountain Tops, both of them obviously are not conducting business right now. They're hoping with phase 4 to re-examine if it's possible, but there are certainly challenges they'd have to address. And right now they're not able to make any commitment. People can bring their own kayaks and kayak here, but those challenges exist, and we'll be just keeping in contact with them to see if things develop. And then just to round out this, we have West Point Foundry Preserve, and 90 acres of land. It has a generous parking area. Most people, it seems, kind of come by, in the past, have come by the train or walked from Main Street. So again, it has a lot of great space for people to be able to get around and enjoy. During the COVID, the toilets are locked. We're not holding any public tours, but there's a couple of ways from your home that you can experience it. You can still go to the park, but instead of having you can't go for a in-person guided tour, we have an audio-visual tour on our website, or foundrytour.org. And just recently, I really am excited how Putnam History Museum had put out these History from Home micro-series about the West Point Foundry Preserve. So those are sort of just the highlights of what's happening in our parks, and we look forward to hearing from you all and continuing to work with our partners. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to thank all of our speakers. This is Michelle Smith from Hudson Highlands Land Trust again, and I thought we could have, we're still asking people for questions. Some of the questions, as you see, they should come up on your screen in that little Q&A box. You will see the questions that people have asked. I thought it would be good to have a little, to revisit some of the questions that I think are really important. They were answered online. The first one I'll ask both to Amy and to Linda that Adrian asked, I'll just repeat it. It was answered online, but I think it's very important, which is the ADA accessibility. So I know that over on the west side of the river, Blackrock Forest has done an amazing job with an ADA accessible trail and access special parking for ADA accessibility. Can you talk a little bit about ADA accessibility on the east side of the river and what is being done to accommodate that? I know, Amy, you had posted an answer to this.
Yes. So I would, my video, okay. So yes, in the master plan for Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail, what we are looking at is a main trail that would be ADA, certainly from Cold Spring to the Breakneck area, and the whole Breakneck connector would be ADA as well. So I think it's a design aspect that we are proactively looking to achieve. And so parking spaces will be created in the formal lots that will be reserved for handicap parking only. And the question was really about, as we think about shuttle service, does that also have an ADA aspect? And we haven't gotten to that level of detail, but we'll certainly keep it in mind since we do hope for this to be a pretty accessible park space.
Great. And I also thought it would be good to ask to repeat Tara Carroll's question, and maybe Tara, if you would like to come onto audio, because I think, you know, it would be great to hear from the Cold Spring businesses. Ashley, I don't know if you can put Tara's audio on, or if she wants to come on audio just to ask some of the questions from the businesses in Cold Spring. She definitely had one about bathrooms. If she doesn't want to come on, I'll just repeat it here.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, I mean, bathrooms in the village have always been an issue. There's really only one public restroom at the base of Main Street. And there's been, you know, it's overrun. There's been vandalism. It's a question of funding and finding people to clean it. So it's just always been an issue, but especially now with COVID, and concerns about spreading of germs, getting the bathrooms cleaned quickly and more frequently. Again, it comes down to funding and safety. But in addition to that, you know, restaurant capacity is extremely limited, and shop owners are not willing to let other people use their employees' restrooms for hygienic reasons. And then, of course, as this develops beyond our dealing with COVID, this, which I'm so excited for and in love with, the Fjord Trail, and as our parks continue to gain visitors, bathrooms are going to continue to be a real issue. And so for the short term, I wonder what the solution is to deal with the bathrooms during COVID and how we can help in any way. But then, of course, long term, if there will be more, you know, is there some sort of calculation for how many bathrooms per expected visitors that, you know, we need to meet?
So I don't know if you want, okay. Ooh, sorry. So we have been looking at the addition of bathrooms. So we have in the Fjord kind of framework, there's entry areas where there might be parking or it's a main access point, and adding bathrooms in those locations. So the bathroom counts for Breakneck, for example, are going to be 8 to 12. units there, and they would be sort of larger composting toilets set in. And so we are working on with an architect on the design of those structures, and we would see those same or very similar structures being placed at the other entry locations, with probably never fewer than 8 bathrooms being added in any of those locations. So it'll hopefully really help add the capacity, and because people can have more easy access to that at Little Stony Point or at Breakneck, then hopefully that will also sort of defray some of the demand that you're experiencing at the set in the village.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Thank you.
There's a series of questions that are a lot to do with traffic and parking. So Gundy has a question about limit the parking. So using parking permits to limit the parking. I know this comes up a lot, so I think it'll be great to address this. And then there's also a question about why you need to have the parallel parking in place to be able to lower the speed limit. So I think if I could ask maybe Linda or Amy to answer both of those questions. One about permits, probably a question for Linda, and then the other one about why you need parallel parking to lower the speed limit.
Okay, so with the 90 corridor, it's a state highway with state DOT. When we've been designing the Breakneck Connector section, it's a 55-mile-an-hour roadway, and there's strong interest for safety to have that lowered. And in working with DOT on this, there's a package of improvements that they would require in order for us to successfully lower the speed limit from 55 to 40. And that includes some vegetated bump outs that we have built into the design, enhanced crosswalks, and what they call side friction. So it lowers the design speed of the road to have that side activity, because people are worried about a door coming open. It just makes drivers slow down a little bit. Because without that, if you just change the number on the sign, they'll still keep driving 55 and it'll just not work. So they're only willing to lower the speed limit if we do a package of improvements. I think we have the flashing beacon and some signage that helps to cue drivers as they're coming down the hill that they're entering a more kind of busy pedestrian area. So that is the package and why we need to do that. It's just not as easy as just changing the speed limit, and that's just not going to work. What was this?
The other one, and maybe, I don't know if Linda wants to address this because it relates to the relationship sort of between parks and DOT, which is about it having parking permits to limit the number of people, using parking permits to limit the number of people who are here and raise revenue for improvements.
So that's one of the items that we had talked about even in my presentation. We said we're just not sure how logistically that could work. So if you have a certain number of parking permits that you're issuing and then you still have to be there to send people away. So how many, are you only issuing, how do you sign up for that? How do you do it? And then all the people that are not aware of it, can we train people over time that the number of parking permits would be the parallel parking and that which is in the MTA lot, or that's what's in the Washburn lot? And what happens when everybody else shows up? Because there's such a porous border around our parks, we're worried that then people would just clog up the local neighborhoods and other areas to start to go into the park from different areas, creating more of a problem. So we're willing to try it if we think we can make it work. We just haven't figured out a system that we think would stick at the moment. And open to looking. I see you said that Sedona, Arizona has it. Well, we'll take a look at what any other entity has. If we think it can work here, we can try it.
I'll just add that for Fjord, we are going, as we add new parking lots, we will be charging a fee for parking in those lots. So Breakneck is a little bit more difficult. Ideally, there would be a gate. We're still working on the design for that, but that will be a great revenue for the ongoing operations and maintenance in the Fjord Trail project area. So Linda covers a larger geography than that, with other park pieces in consideration, but in the Fjord Trail project area, that is something we will be looking to do.
I guess the other thing, Linda, I would ask, is Pete Salmonson asked a question sort of about limiting the numbers, and just back to the permitting issue. Might be good to sort of elaborate on the challenges with the permitting issue, you know, obviously come from enforcement and, as you say, the very porous borders. So, you know, wherever you try and post people entering the park, there's 100 other ways to enter Hudson Highlands State Park. So how do you police something like that? Do you want to just talk about some of the challenges with permitting?
I think you just said them. So
Yeah.
the issue for us is that we watched it. We watched it over the last month or two as we were closing the areas. And we had to staff it. We had to have people actually out there to turn people away. But B, we would stand there and watch people try to go in through Nelsonville or go in through Route 9 or come in through any myriad of different ways. And then we have people who might be unfamiliar with it, and they'll just try to go in up areas that are rattlesnake, you know, habitat, or areas that they would even do more damage to the environment. So we're trying to actually get people on trails, and on trails that are rock and actually can sustain the kind of use that we're getting, as opposed to diverting them to areas that might have a more fragile environment. And again, we've been trying to figure out how we could do this. If there is a mechanism, we're willing to try, but given the number of people who seem to arrive without having seen it, we had digital messaging signs on all of the parkways coming out of New York City for days on end and weeks on end. We had it in all of the major hiking media, hiking trail sites said that we were closed, and that it was on the park's website. It was on, we still received, what, 500 people a day on a nice day that were coming up saying, we didn't know it was closed. So, and we had it attached into Google Maps. It was on the 511 alert. So if people were searching for that, they would have seen that the trailheads were closed. And we're just concerned that it would be difficult to message out to the number of people that are coming, and it's all big roads. But that doesn't mean it can't work. So if somebody can come up with a concept that's workable, we're willing to try.
Another question that's been out there for a while, the chalet, why is it being demolished, and what is the site going to be used for?
The chalet just really was not configured or able to be a building or structure that was going to be useful in the context of State Parks. State Parks has purchased the chalet from the Open Space Institute, which purchased it from the owner of the facility. And so the building will be taken down. We're going to demolish most of the parking area because it's not in great condition. We hope to leave about 20 or 25 spots there, the southern part of the lot, to be an access, and put a new access trail to the Brook Trail. So that's what we're looking to accomplish there, but it just didn't work as a viable structure for us to maintain for the future.
And Lisa DeMazo's had a question about the trolley. What's the status of the trolley? Is it restarting? So this is more the Putnam County question. And then I don't know if there's also an additional, there's a question about the shuttle being different from the trolley. Obviously the trolley is Putnam County. Then what you're trying to start as part of Fjord Trail will be the separate shuttle system. So yeah. I don't know if you know when the trolley.
The Department of Transportation runs the trolley. I am unaware of whether or not they intend to start it this summer. That would be a determination that has to be made by Putnam County's government. And the shuttle, and we distinguish it by using the different name, is really, we envision that being perhaps a van, or it could be a trolley, but something that is hopefully privately subsidized, but then working in concert with the Fjord and the state parks to be able to, as Amy referenced, to be able to deliver hikers from one area to another, or leave a car somewhere and still try a different trailhead. So right now the trolley operates. It takes them an hour to go from Cold Spring to Beacon and back, and then it's an hour to go out to Fonstock and back. So it's if you end up having to wait 2 hours from whatever time you get to the to a trailhead, it's not likely that you're going to do that. So we want something that's a little bit more frequent.
So I was also going to ask, I know Nancy Berner, in the interest of full disclosure, she is our board chair. She has a question about the Trail Steward program, but also about overcrowding that's not just in the 9D corridor and what might be done. So we might just ask her if she wants to come on audio to ask her questions, because they could be a little interactive about the volunteer Trail Steward program, and also the possibility of having trail stewards at these other locations. For example, on Denny Town Road, Sunken Mine Park Lot, the Appalachian Trail parking lot. Nancy, do you want to come on?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I think that the Trail Steward program has been so successful at Breakneck, but one of the, I guess, results of the 9D corridor being closed is that we've seen so many people hiking in Fonstock, which is such a much more fragile landscape. So I wonder whether you can imagine the Steward program being able to not just educate people, and I'm really specifically talking about Fonstock here, about the trails themselves and how to conduct themselves, but also to manage the parking, which is, I think everyone would agree, has gotten out of control. And I'm going to throw a second question in there in the interest of time, which is just for those of us who are on this call who care so much about these parks. And I wonder whether, and this is really, I think, for you, Linda, whether you can kind of point us to ways that we can be better advocates for our parks, because I think there's a really robust community right here that cares deeply about these parks, and whether we can be better advocates. I know funding is obviously going to be a problem for the foreseeable future, but what can we do? So I leave you to that. And I just, as the chair at the the Land Trust, I want to thank all of you participants so much for what you do for our fabulous Hudson Highlands. So thank you.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks for the great questions. You know, we agree, Fonstock has a significantly more fragile landscape than the Hudson Highlands, and we've been very, very mindful that as the Hudson Highlands were closed, that Fonstock was bearing a brunt of that. And it's been an interesting discussion for us over the last few years, because one of our original thoughts was, let's disperse everybody, let's move them out, let's get them to other places, have them discover these lesser traveled trails. And then we went, maybe not, because some of the lesser traveled trails are not as rocky and durable as some of the Hudson Highlands trails. So there's a little bit of, you need to evaluate, you know, how many people can be down at Constitution Marsh, how many people can be down in the Garrison trails near Arden Point, how many people can be over at Sunk Mine or at Jordan Pond, or some of the different areas that we have, and they each have different habitat, and we're trying to make sure that we don't inundate one detrimentally because we're taking care of another. We did notice that this weekend when we opened up the Hudson Highland Trails, the traffic in Fonstock reduced significantly. So we know that there is an outlet to pull, and we were very grateful to the Putnam County Sheriff, who on this past weekend they were unable to help because of the protests, but they've been helping us with the Route 301 parking management for a while. And we agree, we'd love to be able to put people on on many of the trailheads. You know, certainly the Appalachian Trail corridor is very important to us, and we're continuing to work with the Hudson Highlands Land Trust and how to move toward better protection and better buffers for that. And many of our trails there, and that one way people could help is as we create this volunteer program, which might not have as many hours as the Breakneck Stewards commitment are. is, but I think that if we could get people to almost adopt areas that they wouldn't mind being an ambassador and helping people understand during key moments what it means to hike in those trails and what it, have information on hand. Certainly our Taconic Outdoor Education Center and our environmental educators are usually out and offering programs in a lot of the Fahnestock area, and we would be happy to kind of support that effort in providing information to people that would want to help us at the different trailheads at particular times of day, and we can figure out when it's most needed. And we'll be coordinating with Hank, because I think the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, as noted, has offered to spearhead that volunteer program if we can get people to volunteer to help us with the trail, not just in maintenance, which they currently have trail maintainers, but with ambassadors or whatever you want.
Nancy, my vision for what the volunteer steward program could be in Fahnestock specifically is evolving, and I'm going to continue to seek input from other people, from stakeholders and partners, and to figure out exactly what the best way to implement it would be. But the trails in Fahnestock are indeed fragile, and there's some beautiful, very less traveled trails with moss on them, and having high numbers of visitors, it would change the character of those trails for a long time. And the stewards can be a true solution to helping to educate visitors for how to walk on those trails, and how to stay on the trails, and where to go, and volunteer stewards could play a large role in being ambassadors and being able to communicate what the visitors need to hear in order to treat the area well.
Thank you. I think we have a question that's been sitting out there a while from Rue Roush, which I do want to get to. There's a couple of other people, Katrina, Fred Osborne, and Alyssa Wooldridge. We will have the panelists, maybe while I speak and others speak, to answer Rue's question, answer this question, or follow up with you afterwards to answer your questions, because we only have a couple of minutes left. And I think it would be great to end on the answer to Rue Roush's question, which is, what measures are being taken to protect plants and animals, reptiles, given the high increase in visitation?
Let me take a first stab. Do you want me to can I take a first stab and then you'll follow up?
Okay.
Sounds great.
So we have a regional biologist who spends a lot of time in the highlands and marks these things out. So we try to ensure that the trails are moved away from any of the fragile communities when possible. We have been working with an ecology working group team that is working on the Fjord Trail. So again, looking to ensure that the Hudson Highlands Park Preserve, it's a park preserve, it's not just a hiking area. We know that it has a tremendous amount of habitat for threatened and endangered species, that both plant and animal, and that is very much a priority of state parks, that we move to protect these, as well as take care of the raw human wish to be in high places and look at beautiful things.
So I can speak to the steward solution response, which is that in the Catskills, we have stewards stationed on the summits, on the fragile alpine ecosystems of the summits, and they specifically are there to educate the illegal campers and other visitors about the fragile environment. And then this spring, I had a slide of it in my presentation about our vernal pool steward. We just started this program this spring, and it's a steward not at a trailhead or at a summit, but at a key sensitive area that can help educate the visitors. And we feel in just the few short weeks that we had that program going, we saw a tremendous success in the amount of people that were able to learn about how their behavior impacts the environment. So that type of expansion into that type of stewarding has a lot of potential.
Great. Well, thank you both. We're coming up to 12:30. I wanted to let everybody know that the webinar will be available. I'm thinking, I don't know if Ashley can come on, but I think it will be available on our website and social media, so that if people miss parts of it, or if they want to share it with any of their friends or colleagues, they'll be able to do so. I want to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists who did an amazing job, not only presenting what's going on, but also answering people's questions. And I hope this becomes part of a series of more discussion with the community. I hope one day soon we can get together in person to talk about these issues. And thank you to all of our participants for joining. We really appreciate your engagement in this issue. Thank you.
Thanks to Hudson Highlands Land Trust, by the way, for sponsoring this. It's very
Thanks.
nice.
Our pleasure.
And a big shout out to our staff. Evan Thompson's on the line, Declan Henley, the assistant park manager, and all the staff that really have devoted their careers and their life to helping people enjoy the Hudson Islands. It's really important.
Thank you. All right.